Good evening. This is Avram Shira for Web Yeshiva. Welcome to a new Zman, our fall Zman, and very excited to begin what I call a tour of the Arizal. The Arizal's writings are endless, literally, and the detail that he takes a person to in Kabbalah and in the structure of creation itself is very deep and well beyond a lot of people's ability. So the idea of this class is that we can scan the main ideas and topics that he touches on and gain a picture of the world through the Arizal's eyes. Of course, that might be a bit much to take on, but I think it'll be much more interesting and applicable to us as beginners in the study of Kabbalah. I've been doing it for quite a few years, but I still consider myself a beginner. Now, we're going to start with a song that we sing on Friday nights called Zamar B'Shvachim, but we're going to translate it and interpret it with a broader perspective than we might often see. So this is found in most Sidurim, at least Hasidic and Kabbalistic Sidurim, on Friday night after Kiddush, and if anybody wants to follow. So the Rav begins, Azamar B'Shvachim, I will sing praises. But the Lashon Azamer, or Zemer, is also the Lashon of Zimirot, which is connected to the Lashon of Zmurah, which means trimming or pruning trees. So the Lashon here is very interesting because it's not just that he's singing, he's pruning. He's pruning with his voice. And we're going to see this idea more than once. The male go pitchin, to go within the entryway. In other words, to sing our way into a portal of heaven, which is a beautiful idea that we can actually sing our way into heaven. Now, the simple translation doesn't include this idea that I see over here in a note. We are pruning away the evil forces. So what it's really teaching us, that by singing, we cut away negative forces. And what happens when you cut away negative forces, we automatically open up a place to enter a higher realm. So it's a symbiotic relationship. By singing, we cut away the negative and bring ourselves close to the entry of the higher worlds. And he calls it, where are we entering? Dafka, because in heaven is infinite as Hashem, and there are many, many ways into heaven. You can get into heaven by doing a mitzvah with Mesirat Nefesh. You can get into heaven by doing a mitzvah with pure, complete L'Shem Shamayim joy. And there are many other ways that are described, through meditation, through prayer, through Mesirat Nefesh, self-sacrifice. So we should not think of it as the only way I have to get close to Hashem is what I've already learned, but there are many techniques and tools and pathways. And of course, here we're talking about singing, which is a universal thing, of course. But where are we going to? To the palace, which is literally called the Orchard of the Holy Apples. Now, what is this beautiful language, Orchard of Holy Apples? Wonderful, but where is that, and what does it mean? So inside the works of the Arizal, he describes that the Orchard of Holy Apples is where the life force is coming down from the world of Yetzirah, the world of emotion, the world of formation. The life force comes down literally like droplets, or like the Rav calls them apples. They're little capsules of divine power that are coming down through the world. Why here on Friday night? Because this is the time that the orchard opens up. Now, the worlds are stacked together, if you will, from the transcendent, the intellectual, the emotional, and the physical. On Shabbos, what happens is that the physical level is pulled upward, elevated into the emotional. In other words, our bodies and our feelings are unified, so to speak, and then lifted up into the intellectual. And then by Mincha of Shabbat, all three of those levels are unified in what's called Atzilut, or the realm of closeness to Hashem. And this ladder is literally, imagine, like one force joining another one and going up and up. But what happens when Asiya, the world of action, is bound with the world of emotion and is raised up, it leaves an empty space. This empty space is called empty relatively to our understanding. But this empty space is called the Holy Apple Orchard. And this is where new, beautiful Torah insights can be picked like apples. That's one idea. Of course, inspiration can come in many forms, not just Torah insights. Inspiration can become an idea to improve your business. Inspiration, godly inspiration, can be a way to fix your relationships or to help your parents, or whatever thing it is that we need to do. On Friday night is a time of new ideas, a time of divine ideas that come down. So that's another way of understanding this Holy Apple Orchard, where these apples are coming down, and it's opened up because Shabbat pulls the world up. Okay. Nazamin la hashita, he goes on, the next verse. We invite her now. Her, of course, is the Shekhinah, the Torah Hadata, to a new festive table. In other words, Shabbos, obviously a part of Shabbos is the festive, the beautiful meal that's laid out on a table. Uminata tafta, and beautiful candles, dinara al reshin, are shining above our heads. Okay, now this is another little code or secret idea that we need to take note of, this idea of inviting the Shekhinah. Now, I don't know about all of you, but in my own religious path, or my path to Hashem, because it wasn't always religious, the idea of inviting the divine was foreign. I understood that you ask God for things, and sometimes you get them, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel like praising Him because He's great. You have a new recognition of God's greatness, so we praise Him. But an invitation is not is the same as a request. An invitation is like, I would love to have you come over. But there's no connotation if you decide not to come. If I invite you over for Friday night meal and you say, oh, Avram, I'd love to come, but I can't, I'm not going to feel bad. I'm not going to feel hurt. I'm not going to feel like my request wasn't honored. Whereas when I ask you for something, can I borrow your car? Can I, will you loan me some money, etc.? Then all of a sudden, my need becomes personal. So I want to introduce this idea and keep also this back of our minds, that there's this level of relationship to the divine and the divine presence that's gentle and it's passive. It's please come over, visit me. But it's not a demand. It's not with aggression. It's not with a personal forcefulness, if you will. So we invite the Shekhinah to a new beautiful table, which is sitting in front of us on Shabbos night, with these beautiful candles shining above our heads. Now, generally, the lights above the heads are always a metaphor for what's called the makifim, or the transcendent lights. Now, transcendent lights, Rabbi Nachman defines as that inspiration, those ideas that you have yet to incorporate into your intellect. In other words, the things you don't yet know that you don't know, but they're there. And that's really what makes up part of what we call in modern literature the aura, or a person's halo, the glow of that you might see over some special people. Now, a few times in my life I've merited to meet holy people, and you can definitely tell there's something glowing there over this person's head. These are the lights above the head. They're called transcendent intellects in English, or makifim, but the idea is They are the next level that I have yet to incorporate into my consciousness. And they're there. They're just waiting outside our consciousness. And they want to come in. And of course, Friday night is the ideal time. So we go on, and the next verse, Yamina Ushmola, the right and the left. Of course, Chesed is the right arm, Gevura is the left arm, the idea of kindness and the idea of strength. We must blend the two together in order to reach what's called the middle level, Ubinahu Kala. But between kindness and strength, Chesed and Gevura, is the Shekhinah herself, the bride. So immediately here the Arizal is introducing the metaphor of marriage, male-female relationships, and the idea of a new bride. Now, Baruch Hashem, my wonderful daughter Shira got engaged this week, so it has a little more significance in our family. But this Kala, this bride, is that balance, that center between these two powers, Chesed and Gevura, these opposites, if you will. So what it's really teaching us is that if we want to get close to the bride, if we want to get close to the divine presence, we've got to find that sacred center, that middle column, it's called, the Kav Yarok, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai calls it in the famous song that we sing in Lod Bomer, etc., on Friday night, Bar Yochai. That middle line is the Kala, and that is that perfect balance between the two extremes. Bikishutin Azla, and this bride is escorted and adorned with jewelry and ornaments, and jewels and robes. All of these metaphors do refer to external realms or spiritual realms that are reflected in the dress of a bride, which, of course, Shabbat, that tells us Shabbat is really about a certain type of wedding. Okay, it's a wedding between man and God. And so the idea of the adornments of Friday night, of Shabbat, of getting dressed up, of wearing our best clothes, it's all related and connected to this idea of the elevation, because everyone knows, I'm sure you experienced it, that when you get ready to go out, it's Saturday night, you take a shower, you're going to go out in the town, you're going to go to a fancy restaurant, you get dressed up. Why do we get dressed up? Is it so that I can show off to the world that I have nice clothes? That's not a very expanded reason, right? And so that I can impress people that I'm someone I'm dating? Well, maybe. But another reason is because it makes me feel good to dress up. Now that feeling good, it might sound selfish, but that's exactly where we can begin to serve Hashem. That when I dress up, it makes me feel good, then I can be in an elevated state to serve Hashem. So the idea of dressing up is not simply the external physical, but it's about transforming something inside. That we are literally lifted up by our clothes. And it's not something small. And at least every woman knows, what it is to put on a new dress. And certainly most guys know too, to put on a clean shirt and a new suit is a special feeling. There's something about that garment. And in Kabbalah, that garment has significance. It's not simply a piece of fabric. It's a vessel for receiving another one of those transcendent lights. But, when you put a suit on, it covers your torso, the middle part. The torso is connected to our emotional center, which is why I use the phrase feeling good. When you put something, a hat or a head covering on, it's not so much about an emotional center, but an intellectual idea. We'll get there. So that's the idea also of wearing a crown. Okay. So the Kala, the bride, the center column, is beautified and carried into the Shabbat. Yahabik Labala. Her husband hugs her. Now, we've learned in previous semesters a beautiful idea about the union of male-female, and the way that Kabbalah describes it, and even in Halakha, we follow the same pattern, that when a man and a woman are together, that it begins at the head, the union begins at the head and goes downward through the torso and towards the lower parts of the body. So that's why we say that the first thing you do would be to kiss somebody, then hug them, and then the actual union. However, the Arizal starts here with the hugging because it's a more tsanua concept. But in the halakha, when they teach young men who don't know anything about this aspect of life, young religious men who've not heard or learned because they've been sheltered or they've been protected, if you will, and they don't know about male-female relations, they go to classes before they get married to find out how things are supposed to happen on their wedding night. And this is one of the things they teach them, that there's a seder, there's an order of intimacy that's taking place on a physical level, but that also takes place on a spiritual level as well between us and Hashem. That Hashem doesn't overwhelm us with his light, but rather he sends us a little light, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until we're completely surrounded, if you will, in the embrace of God. So it always goes in a very measured way, and it's important to remember that. Because it's not some kind of, mystical time bomb that explodes, but rather it's a very measured, gentle process of unification. The Yesoda delay, the song goes on. And in the Yesoda delay, and literally, Dila means in the foundation, her foundation, the Aved Naichala, that makes her happy. The Naicha also is connected to the, it's Aramaic, but it is, phonetically it's connected to the idea of Nachat, or comfort, relaxation. So this is another important feature about our spiritual service, is that there has to be a certain level of nachat, or comfort, in our relationship with Hashem. That we're not simply storming heaven, and we're not sitting in the back seats waiting for everybody else to do the work, but rather there is this level of comforting, guiding, dressing, embracing the Kala, bringing her, and of course, Yeh Katish Katishim. And she will, and the evil forces will be crushed and destroyed completely. So this is the second reference in the song to this treatment of the evil forces. In the first verse we said we cut them away, but here they're crushed completely. And as everybody knows, when a person goes to try to become holy, the first thing that happens is he gets whacked, he gets hit by all kinds of things that are trying to test us to see how much we really want to come close to Hashem. And Rabbi Nachman calls this hatchalat hitkaravut hitrahakut, that the beginning of getting close is being pushed away, being made far. And this can be very frustrating to a new person in religious practice, in Torah practice, because no one likes to get pushed away. And if I go out and make the effort, I'm going to keep Shabbat for the first time this week. I'm going to start eating kosher this week. I'm going to change my wardrobe, whatever it might be. The first thing that's happened is you're going to get opposition, whether you're friends or your family or neighbors, who could be anybody. It doesn't even have to be a person, for that matter. You go out and buy new dishes for Shabbos, and the box falls and breaks the dishes. God forbid. But still, these obstacles are actually just there to test us, to see how much we really want the thing that we're after. Because I'm not really after the new dishes or the new clothes, or someone, pours a glass of wine on your white suit. I'm after Shabbos. I'm after the experience of a God through Shabbos. Okay, but here at this level already, when there's this embracing is taking place between Am Yisrael and Hashem, between each individual Jew and his holy soul, then the evil forces are crushed completely, the Rav says. Okay, now the next verse, Tzavachim af atkim betenin ushvitim. These evil forces cry out. They literally, the tzvach is like to bark, like a dog. Now, dogs are one of the metaphors for the negative forces. Throughout the Kabbalah, as we go further, we'll see that many physical creatures are used as metaphors for negative forces. Dogs are one of them. Flies are one of them. Mosquitoes, I'm thinking out loud, moths, even, of course, the pig, a donkey, a goat. All these creatures have certain characteristics that represent the negative forces that we have to encounter on our path. So the metaphors, the names, it's not to put down donkeys or goats or flies or mosquitoes, but it's actually to give us a sense of what we're dealing with. Because each animal has a different quality or trait. Like a fly, is kind of, it buzzes you, it comes back and it comes back and it comes back. And a fly is a metaphor for a spiritual force that's trying to separate us from ourselves. And it's like a bad thought. It keeps coming back and it won't leave us alone. Now that's one of the ways, by the way, you know when a thought is coming from the other side, because it keeps coming back. It won't leave you alone. Whereas a holy thought, it comes, it leaves its message, and it goes. So it's a very subtle thing that we have to learn, is to pay attention to our thoughts and understand the distinction between a holy thought and an unholy thought, because if you can get to that level of distinction, you're going to be on the way. And when you see that you have a thought that keeps bothering you, that's a sign it's not coming from the right place. We got to throw that away. But if it's a good a thought that comes, and then it leaves its message and goes, doesn't come back to bother you, we would say that most likely is from a holy source, which we want to recognize and pay attention to. But anyways, so these barking forces and etc. are canceled out, and shvitim, they're pushed away, they're put down completely. Baram anpin hadatin v'ruchin im nafshin. But what happens? Baram anpin hadatin, people receive a new face. V'ruchin im nafshin, and a new spirit and soul. Now, ruach, of course, refers to the emotional level. Nefesh refers to the physical level. But this new face. Now, I'm sure anybody who's around the Jewish world has seen people really do look different on Shabbat, if you pay attention. And that difference is all the difference. That difference is that if a person's in the right place, then he will channel some of the light of Shabbat on his face. The face is the primary beacon of a person's soul. Of course, the eyes, we know about. The mouth, of course, reveals a person's mind. Even the way a person breathes reveals his emotional level. If you pay attention to when people breathe, when they're angry, when they're afraid, when they're passive, when they're aggressive, there's all kinds of different breathing that takes place. These are all coming out of the face, because the face is the main emanation, one of the main emanation points of our soul. So, Baruch Hashem, on Shabbat we get a new face. Now, Motzi Shabbat, well, that's a different story. Now, Hadu Sage Yete, and then afterwards, this Sabbath soul brings great joy, a double measure of joy, as a matter of fact. Va'al Hadatarte, Venora la Yimte. And there's abundant blessing and light, Birka'anda Nefishi, extra blessing that is coming down with the Shabbat. We learned in the Zohar says that when the Jewish people made the golden calf, they had two crowns that they were given at Har Sinai, at the Mount Sinai. And when they made the golden calf, the one crown was taken away. Where did those crowns go? The Zohar says that they were gathered in by Moshe Rabbeinu, and then every Friday night, when a person keeps Shabbat with joy and love and awe, he gets that crown back for Shabbat. So the crown, again, we go back to the metaphor of the makifim, the surrounding lights of the intellect, the aura. We get that crown back every Friday night, and then it goes back to its store place in heaven until next Shabbat. So this is this idea of the abundant blessing that's coming down is through that crown that we're getting on Friday night. Now, Krivu Shushvinim Avidu Tikunim. The song goes on. Then the escorts, the escorts draw close. The Avidu Tikunim, and they make preparations for Shabbat. Now, Avidu Tikunim, you could say, that's what the plumber does. He does Tikunim. Here in Israel, that's not unusual. But here, Avidu Tikunim really means creating channels of light from above to below. A tikkun is a word everybody in the Jewish world has probably heard, and we translate it as rectification or repair. I like kind of restoration, but it also carries the connotation of something new. Avidu Tikkuni means something new has happened, a new channel has come down between heaven and earth. So that's on a much broader scale than the idea of preparing the Shabbos table and all the food, etc., but they're connected. La Pashazini, the song goes on to bring forth delicacies, right? Nunin im rachshin, fish as well as birds, fowl. The basic Shabbos menu. No, it doesn't say gefilte fish, but it does say fish. I'll let everybody decide what they like. Now, again, because we're trying to operate on several planes at once, fish are a metaphor for tzaddikim, as most people have heard. They're also a metaphor for the tribe of Yosef. The Zohar says because most fish don't have eyelids. In other words, they don't close their eyes underwater, like most of us when we jump in a lake, right? And so tzaddikim, they say that tzaddikim are like fish because their eye is always open to Hashem. Now, in the structure of the world, there's a place called Eina Pikicha. It's very high in the keter of the tree of life, the crown of the tree of life. And this is another metaphor for the idea of God never closing his eyes. God doesn't need to sleep, and therefore he doesn't need to close his eyes. His eyes are always open, and we can relate the eye also to the idea of hashgacha pratit, or divine providence, that we like when we say that God is watching us. It's a positive connotation, right? So this eye is connected to the idea of the fish, which don't close their eyes and which are connected to tzaddikim. The imrachashin, and birds throughout the Tanakh are used as metaphors for angels. Now, birds fly; they deliver things when they fly. Oftentimes, birds are one of the main ways that seeds are spread around the planet to reforest places and add new trees, etc., etc. Birds carry seeds, and they drop them when they go to the bathroom, or if they spill their lunch. But the idea here of birds are these delivery systems in the spiritual realm as well. Ofa Shemayim yolichet hakol, that the bird of the heaven will release the voice, give forth the voice. And there is this uncommon but understandable idea that birds, even a physical bird that flies across your path, am I saying that the angel is a bird? No. A bird is a bird. But an angel needs a physical object to ride into this world. An angel, even if it just takes a form, a translucent form of light, it's still physical compared to its root. But oftentimes, a lower level angel needs something physical to ride into the world. And a bird is one of the options. We say that Osei melachav ruchot, that God makes his angels wind. So there's another idea that angels can use wind to enter the world. And this is might be new to some of you. It might even be unacceptable or strange. But again, we have to understand how unified the spiritual and the physical realms are. It's not, as the rabbis teach us, that heaven is only 3 fingers, shalosh etzbaot, away from the physical realm. In other words, hold up 3 fingers from your eyes. Heaven is that far away. Now, how can that be? Heaven feels like it's millions of miles away. It feels that way because I'm trapped in a physical body. But the truth is that the spiritual is riding on the physical all the time. They are one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. God is one in the physical and the spiritual. The distance, the distinction depends on us. How between the physical and the spiritual. But really, they're very close together, and we just have to change our paradigm, change the way we look at it, and we'll see that it's true. Now, I've heard stories about dogs, about cats, about all kinds of animals that do outrageous things. It could be very simple that, God wants to save somebody, and there happens to be a dog nearby, so God throws an angel on top of the dog, and the dog picks up the baby out of the river. It's happened. Go on YouTube, these miracles happen. What's happening, I believe, is that Hashem is looking over the person who wants to do a miracle, wants to save somebody, and he uses whatever physical creature that he needs to perform that miracle at that time. So let's try to change a little bit the way we think of physical beings, physical creatures, because they are also channels for spiritual influence. Okay. Lemaved nishmati. Now we come to a new level. Another thing that's happening on Shabbat is that new souls are formed. Now, I've seen written, I believe, from the Ramchal, that the main avoda of the tzaddikim is to bring new souls into the world. But that doesn't sound like a big idea, really, because everybody has children. Not everybody has children, I shouldn't say that. Most people have children. Bringing children is a form of bringing new souls into the world. But there is a level of bringing souls into the world without the physical aspect. Now, this is a very high level. There have been stories throughout Jewish history of great tzaddikim who brought souls into dead bodies to point out who a murderer was to protect Jews, like Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzir. I remember one I think it was in Tfilet. Maybe some of you remember or could correct me. One of those little Moroccan towns where the holy Jews lived, and they brought a libel against a Jew for murder, and they went to Rabbi Yaakov, and he did a prayer, and the dead person got up. It was an Arab, got up and pointed, and Rabbi Yaakov told him, point to who killed you, and he pointed to some other Arab in the crowd, and so that they knew that this was the murderer and not some Jew. What happened was, of course, the guy who had been murdered, his whole family fell down on their knees before Rabbi Yaakov and begged him to let their boy live. And Rabbi Yaakov said, I can't let him live because I would be changing Maseh Bereshit. Because from the beginning of time, it was decreed that this event would take place. But if I let him stay in the world, then it changes everything after for everybody interconnected to that soul. So they had to let the soul go back. And the family was screaming and wailing is the way I heard the story. And Rabbi Yaakov, the body just laid back down. But as the story goes, that the family did convert to Judaism actually after that miracle. But this is the idea of bringing a soul. This wasn't a new soul. This is a dead soul that came back into a body. But the idea is that the tzaddik has this power to pull down new soul. Now, guess what? We can too. Not at the level, perhaps of, not perhaps, but of Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzir, which was Baba Sali's great-grandfather, but rather at the level of new soul that enlivens us. And new soul power is a reflection of the same tree of life that carries a whole individual. So when you get a new soul on Shabbos, you get a new soul. You get that Shabbos soul that was taken away after the Chet Egel. We get that little soul back. Now it's new because each week it's being renewed by our mitzvot that we do each week. So the Shabbos soul that you're getting each week is also a new soul based on the avodah that we've done during the week: prayer, good deeds, Torah learning, etc. And so that's all coming down. So new souls are being made and coming into the world. We do not live in a static world. It is not changing. It is not staying the same. It is not even repeating itself. But rather it is new in a spiralic manner that we're going over the same territory, but on higher and higher levels. Okay, Lemavad Nishmatim, Meruchim, Hadatim, and new spirits as well. And this is why, by the way, when you really daven, you wake up afterwards. Real davening means you feel better than you did before you davened. Now, if I daven and I don't feel good afterwards, then I haven't davened properly. Because real davening means I pulled some new soul power out of the root of my being. And that's what it's about. The Tartin, the Tlatin, and guess where they come down in? In the 32 pathways of the heart, which are represented, of course, the 10 Sefirot and the 22 letters of the alphabet, which should give us should ring a bell that these 32 pathways of wisdom, which are also, by the way, represented in the 32 teeth, are also represented in the nerve that comes out of the brain, out of the eyes, down the spine, and into the heart. And that's why the pasuk says, Ayin ro'ah v'lev chomed, right? That Shlomo Melech said that the eye sees and the heart desires, because the eye is very, very connected to the heart. But on the level of the tree of life, these 22 letters and 10 Sefirot are what's creating us. And Rabbi Nachman teaches that we are literally our thoughts. Our soul is a thought-producing entity. We're like we're literally information processors that use language to exist in consciousness. Without language, we don't exist. Now, this is very, we could be sitting around and talk about this all night. I'm sure, and I'm sure all of you have interesting insights and things to share about some of these ideas, because this is really, to think about yourself as a word processor, it might not be so comforting. But truly, I'm looking through your notes now. I'm going to come back to them. But truly, we understand that the Aleph Bet and language itself, the holy language especially, is the conduit of our souls in various little packets of energy called Aleph Bet, Gimel Daled, etc., and the 10 Sefirot. Okay. Now, Utlata Shibshin is the last phrase of this verse. We translate as the 3 branches, but it literally, of course, means the 3 branches of Torah, which are Tanakh, Torah, which is Chumash, right, and the prophets and the latter writings of the all 24 books of the Tanakh together. Torah, Ketuvim, and what's the other one? Tanakh, and the Nevi'im. Thank you. Okay, so those 3 branches, of course, because the ultimate expression of language is the Torah. Okay, now, I see Peter has written a Tzimtzum to song. Very good. I like that idea, because song, I chose this as the beginning of our class because I wanted something short and powerful and to the point. And if some of the other introductions that we'll come to are not as broad and generalized, and I think to learn about this is really a wonderful preparation for Shabbat as well. But why? Because when we're taking, what we do is God's light is infinite. It needs to be constricted in order to be useful in the world. Without a vessel, that light can actually damage. It does damage. And so the vessel is the object of the Tzimtzum. In this case, the vessel of words is the Tzimtzum of the Arizal's wisdom to present a picture that teaches us. That's a very good chop there, Peter. Now, Sarah writes, is there a connection to the apple tree in Gan Eden, the Adam Ein, and Erev Shabbat? This is Mizmor is a tikkun? Very good. I'm going to start with the last thing you said first. This Mizmor is a tikkun. Because when a tzaddik at the level of the Arizal writes a song, it's Ruach HaKodesh. And Ruach HaKodesh is, of course, being transmitted from above, which we know who's behind that. So, yes, it is a tikkun. It is a channel that opened up when he wrote it in 1560, 1565, whenever he wrote it. That was a channel that didn't exist before. When he wrote it, it became that. Now, that you're asking, is there a connection? Apple, I know you're playing with the concept, but in Gan Eden and Adam 8 Erev Shabbat. That's a powerful idea because we associate that fruit from Erev Shabbat in the garden as the Eitz Hadat Tov Ra. We don't associate it with the Eitz Chaim, the tree of perpetual life, but rather the fruit that we associate with the garden is, of course, the fruit of duality, of dichotomy, of contradiction, and all the concepts that can drive us crazy. That we need the balance between these contradictions in order to live in this world. But again, what do we say in the beginning? That the Kav, the middle line, is the Kala. That's where the bride resides. Now, so I would not want to necessarily connect that fruit with any other fruit per se. But if you want to argue about it, we can. Now, in the book, The Coming Revolution by Zamir Cohen, he writes that there's a machine that can show a person's aura and putting on tefillin changes the man's aura. That's right, Yeshua. I've heard of that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Russian scientists developed a camera like this. Is it called Carillion photography? Maybe? Named after the scientist, perhaps? Some of you, I'm sure you could look it up in a second. But yes, that is a clear thing. I've heard other stories similar. Shabbat as symbolic as God's chesed in the vacated space mediated by the tzimtzum. God's absence rest, which permits plurality to avoid nullification by echad. Okay. A place for Adam to fall from Gan Eden. Wow. I like what you're trying to accomplish there, Peter. But it's dangerous because when we talk about the fall, we're talking about Adam falling into Klippa. On Shabbat night, there's no Klippa. We're above the level of the Klippot of Asiya and Yetzirah, for that matter. So I'm not sure that transfer of ideas that you're connecting here completely works, but it's interesting. Because the vacated space that's created by the elevation of the world, we don't call that like the vacated space of the Tzimtzum. That's a different idea of vacated space. The vacated space in the Hachat HaPulchin Kadishin is not empty. It's not a vacuum, but rather it's a garden of light.
Rabbi?
Yeah? Huh?
I was more thinking of a fall from singularity to plurality.
Okay.
Adam's change from being in the Garden of Eden as a singularity and no separation between him and God, and then becoming plural after the decision, the change. So that plurality, and then of course once it becomes plural, it can no longer exist in oneness and has to go to a place which is created by the Zimtzum, being a possibility of plurality. That's the mechanism. Okay,
I agree. The way you described it there, or explained it there, is much clearer. Thank you. That I can understand that we did. We're talking about because we understand that all evil is rooted in that vacuum, and so the fall would imply, as you say, the duality and the distancing from Echad. But again, it's only psychic distance. Okay, and Avelina writes, and then we have to find our way back. Yep. They have little things you put on your phone to help you find your way back, don't they? Haloch v'shuv, like haloch v'shuv. Yeah, to go and come back. That's true. There's even a phrase I saw recently. It's attributed to before Moses died. It says that he was no longer able to take the people out and bring them back. And then in Tanakh, we see the same idea about which king was I reading about? I'm not sure if it's Hezekiah or one of the kings of the house of David, was also described as one who would take them in and bring them back. And of course, the most base metaphor of that is the idea of a general taking the army out to fight and bringing them home, which obviously is one of the most dramatic things that human beings have to endure because of this insane institution called war. But going in and coming back is also this idea of going into the holiness and coming back. Hashem Yishmor, but we all have to ride this escalator, if you will, or this ride of going in and out, back and forth. Is that why birds are korbanos? That's an interesting question, Yechezkel. I'm not sure, though, the context of what I said that caused you to ask that question. The bird, we were talking about the bird as a metaphor for angel, or for a information delivery system. That you want, is it called? No, the bird, I think in this context, the idea of the bird, because there are birds in holiness and birds in klipa. The birds in klipa are the birds that scream. Rabbi Nachman says in a very high level of klipa, they're the ones that scream, that try to make us not hear the holy voice, or the holy birds. Now, the holy birds are the source of music and beautiful song, and the unholy ones are the ones that try to break that up. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the basic idea of the korbanot of birds is for the sin of lashon hara, because birds are always making noise. Well, not always, but that's the rabbi's dimayon, imagination of it. That it's a kapara for lashon hara, for improper speech. But it's also used for a poor man's offering, which is interesting. If a person needs to give a korban, he can't afford a cow or a sheep or a goat, he can bring a bird. Certain korbanot. So there is a connection to what you're saying, Yehezkel. Very good. You guys are doing good tonight. So, right, to understand that there are now no new souls now. We are all Gilgulim. I also have heard that kind of idea, and I would withhold myself from agreeing completely, because I don't know. This is the kind of thing you either know it or you don't. And not everybody has access to that information. But my understanding is that there are new souls waiting to come down with the Messiah, with the renewal of the entire world, at least by the year 6000, which we only have 222 years left. So, guys, we just got to hang on a little longer. But new souls in the classic sense, we're talking about Rabbi Nachman or the Baal Shem Tov or these other great tzaddikim that never existed in this world before, that never tasted sin, etc. So that is the general context of new souls, is tzaddikim that have been weighted. The Gemara says that Hashem looked into the generations and saw that there were going to be very few tzaddikim, so he dispersed them over the generations. That he will hold back souls from coming in, because this new soul can do some tremendous good, and he wants to save it for another generation. So there's this dispersal of these perfect souls that have not sinned, that are distributed over the generations. Here we go. I thought was a second soul. I'm sorry, Stephen. I don't understand what you're saying. Maybe you could rewrite it or tell me verbally. Call in. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe you're saying I thought I was a second soul. Is that what you mean? It's an interesting idea. Kirilian. Falling into pride away from right meant the energy of the angels. Kirilian photography. There you go. Wikipedia. So perhaps if you want to comment on this, please feel free to let me know what you're asking or sharing. But we're going to go back to the text. And okay, here we go. Chamber of Guf, also called the Otsar. Right, the treasury is the treasury of souls located in the seventh heaven. Legend has it will be empty. Right. Well, the Gemara also says that the sack, that they compare the rabbis compare the souls in this seventh heaven as like flour in a sack that has to be shaken out. And when the sack is empty, then it's time for the complete renewal. Okay, very good. Anyways, let's go forward. Thank you, Stephen, for the clarification. So these new souls are being drawn down in Shabbat, and they're changing as we grow and adding as we add to our service. Now, after we've learned about this light coming down into the 32 pathways, which is in the heart and is the language processor of emotion becoming conscious, right? Iturim shavin la. Now, crowns 70 crowns are given to the bride. Malka de la Eila, and the upper queen, the upper king, Yitata Kola, and he is also crowned with Kaddish Kaddishim, with holy songs. That when we sing holy songs to Hashem, we are actually crowning Hashem. And certainly if we merit to write holy songs, that we're also adding to God's treasury of human endeavor that elevates or beautifies Hashem, in this world especially. Okay. Rishimin Ustimin, literally, Rishimin and Stimin are engraving and writing, but go kolmin, within the midst, that this Shabbat is engraved. Now, this is interesting. I always like this engraved in Hebrew or in Aramaic because it reminds me of, one of these engraving machines that cuts silicon discs, silicon chips, or for that matter, old records, we're also engraving. But the engraving here is in the Shabbat itself. For the Shabbat is engraved within all worlds. It has been created or brought out of God's treasury from the Ancient of Days. And through the commentator says, including the combining of the four pristine elements, which is a very interesting idea. Now, we all know that we're made of air, earth, water, and fire, the Arba Yesodot, they're called. And those four elements combined create the human body, which give us a place to be in this world. When someone asks you, where do you live? You say, well, in my body. I don't say Manhattan. But really, it's a nice twist in the right moment. But I'm looking over here at another comment. That's going to be tough. To the Reisha and the Seifa, the beginning and the end of this verse, to maybe some of you could help. We'll reread it. The Shabbos is engraved and inscribed within all worlds. In other words, all worlds contain a trace of Shabbos. Whether they're intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual, etc., they all have a trace of Shabbos. And they're brought forth by the Ancient of Days, which is called Atik Yomin. Atik Yomin is extremely high level in the Keter. And he says there, how are they brought forth? Through the combining of the four elements. Now, that's something that I'm not even sure I want to tackle. Because we're talking about extremely high level, and I think here, these four elements that we're talking about, air, earth, water, and fire, are actually the spiritual roots of air and the spiritual roots of earth, water, and fire. That there is in heaven, there is no physical fire, but there is a thing that we identify as fire. The same thing as earth and water, and this is happening in the root of the mind, actually. That there is a place inside us where where the earthy, airy, watery, fiery sides of us are all combined, but they're drawing life force from a non-physical place. I don't know if I want to go further than that because I'll probably jump into speculative territory, and that's going to get me in trouble. Anyways, now the Rav goes on with this song, Yehi Rava Kameh. There will be great desire in His will, that His presence will be for Him, will rest upon His people. Tishrei Alameh. We're literally from the Lashon Tishra Shechina, that there's this idea of being soaked, permeated like a sponge. It's outside, it's inside, it's all of us, right? This light, Yitaneg Lishmei, to enjoy in His name. So this touches on an idea we had earlier. There is this level of pleasure that we get from a new garment or a good food, a drink, etc., etc. But is it lishma? Is it really for God's name? Maybe not. Most of the time, it's pretty hard to get up to that level of lishma. You know, people talk about doing mitzvot lishma, but the minute you even talk about it, doing it lishma, it's still glorifying yourself by saying it, right? And so it's a very subtle, refined place, this idea of doing a mitzvah lishma. The best way to do a mitzvah lishma is make sure nobody else knows about it, right? But that being said, we are talking about God's presence dwelling on his people in order that they have pleasure lishma. In other words, how can I have pleasure lishma if I'm not attached to the Shekhinah? And vice versa, once I'm attached to the divine, then your pleasure center is automatically elevated. That I'm not interested in all the physical things that this world is pushing at us. That I'm interested in really something that causes God pleasure. And by virtue of causing God pleasure, guess what? You get a big download of real pleasure, not physical pleasure. So that's a switch off that we have to make. That if I could just focus for a minute on doing what God wants for his pleasure's sake, we're going to experience a much higher pleasure. Lishme, in his name, but metikin uduksin. And of course, he says with sweet things and honey, candy and honey, right? So we know that we're not really talking about candy and honey, but we're really that Rabbi Nachman again helps us out here. He tells us that the real pleasure of the tzaddikim is the pleasure of the words themselves. The letters of the Torah on the tongue are more pleasant than any kind of physical pleasure. Now, that's kind of it's the kind of thing where you got to experience it for it to actualize, to make an impression on us. It sounds nice, but until you have that pleasure of the words rolling off of your tongue and your lips and your soul coming out with the words, and you're projecting, you literally become a vehicle of projection of soul, then we start to sense, wow, there is something here besides, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Bereshit, Bara, Elokim, right? And all the other verses that we say in the Torah, when we attach to the root of the letters, that's where the real pleasure is. That's a very high level, but we're on the idea again is not how much we get, but how much we try and staying on the path. Hashem will do the rest. Okay. Asader Lidroma. Now we see the Arizal is going to switch to another metaphor, which of course is the Beit HaMikdash. Asader Lidroma. Minarta Destima. In the south side, I will put the holy candelabra. He writes, the stima also can mean hidden or shield. The shulchan minama, and the showbread, the table with the bread, which is we're facing west of the Beit HaMikdash. You always face west because that's the Kodesh Kodeshim. So if you're facing left, right, the south is left, that would be the candles, and the north is where the table is put. Bitzona Arshi, right. In the north, the table is put with the holy bread. Now these directions are not stam. There's nothing stam. Stam in Hebrew, of course, means without meaning, but rather, no, the Beit HaMikdash is the model for all creation. It's the model for how the Sefirot emanate from top to bottom, and it's the physicalization of the tree of life. So that's another idea that we could bounce around for a long time. But there are people that actually try to set their living rooms up this way, and it's it's interesting, because when we turn directions when we shake the lulav and the etrog on Sukkot, we are direction activated beings. We face north. There's a different energy in the universe flowing through us than when you face south. Because remember, we are the center point which God's energy is emanating from. It's not out there in space coming down to us. It's inside us coming out of us. So when you face a direction, you're actually actualizing an energy that's pre-existing in the universe, and it's causing it to flow through us. And that's why we turn the 6 directions with the lulav and the etrog. So same thing in the Beit HaMikdash, where we place the bread to the north and the menorah to the south, and the copper mizbeach for the incense is in the middle, which of course is Tiferet. That those directions are very important to us. Okay, let's see how we got more comments. Apologies. If the Shabbat is maintained by Tzimtzum, Aleph is the root mediated by Yud Kei Vav Kei. Aleph is the root mediated by Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4 elements. It's not really worded in a question, but you have a question mark at the end, Peter. I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to say. Thank you, Dvorah. Here's a link to English translation. Very good. So maybe, Peter, could you maybe rewrite what you're sharing, and I'll keep going. Let's see. The Hamra Go Kasha, of course, wine in a cup. Madne Asa, and various Asa is Aramaic for the myrtle, which is English for Hadassim, right? Hadassim, the myrtle for the bride, a fragrant branch. La'arus, la'arusa, right, for the bride and groom, to invigorate, lekafa, to strengthen, halashim, weak people, or weakness in general. So again, we return to the bride-groom metaphor. We see that this is another little nice thing. That when you smell a pleasant fragrance, it actually gives you strength. This is, by the way, on a fast day, we often try to have some nice smelling things around because it does give us a little bit of power. There is life force in scent. It's not the same as, a hamburger, but there is life force there, very refined, that will soothe even the hunger of a fast. Interestingly, in our yeshiva, in our Shalom in Jerusalem, they pass out myrtle or adassim and other various plants, fragrant plants, is at the end of davening. And I think the idea is generally connected to this because there's also on Friday night, there is the circling of the table. Even people who are really following the Kabbalah to the nth degree, they will circle the table with adassim. And this, again, this idea of a fragrance emitting strength or giving us strength is an important one. Well, check the clock. Here we are. We got 5 minutes left. Well, it's been fun. I don't think we're going to get to the end of the song, but that's okay. We've got time. Now, Na'aved Lahon Kitrin, and crowns are made for the bride and groom. But Milim Yakrim, what are the crowns made of? Precious words. Vishivi Miturim, with 70 crowns. The Al Gabei Chamshin, which are transcend the 50. Now here the 50 is a remnant to the 50 gates. That there is this level above the 50 gates of understanding. Now the 50 gates of understanding it's another whole discussion, and obviously we could spend weeks on that itself. But I think the idea here is that there's this level of Keter that's above the 50 gates. And the 50 gates of understanding, we access those lights during the Sphere to Omer. But what's interesting is the Zohar tells us that each of those gates is its opposite as well. So when we're trying to transcend or elevate ourselves through a gate, you're going from one side to another. Just like when you walk through a gate or an archway, there's a transition period underneath the gate. And the very gate of Tuma becomes the gate of holiness. So it's not like two different places. It's a change of the energy itself. From the holy, from the unholy to the holy. Okay. Tzimtzum Aleph is the first engraving of the Tzimtzum that maintains the vacated space of Shabbat that is structured through the 4 elements of Havaya, called forth through Elohim, the 4 letters of the elements. Very good. I'm sure we could spend time with that. structured, that the vacated space of Shabbat is structured to the 4 elements of Havaya. Right, well, these 4 elements are represented through the Yud K Vav K, of course. Yud is the fire, the first K is the air, the Vav is the water, and the final He is the earth. So that works. They're called forth through Elohim. That's interesting. Elohim is a name of emanation, certainly in Maseh Bereshit. Okay, very good, thank you. The Shechinta Titatar, the Shitna Hamelistar. Now the Shechina is surrounded by the 6 loaves of bread on each side, which of course again is the 12 showbreads. Bavavim Titkatar, and with Vavs, which are of course a letter, Vezinin Dichnishin. The translation says the 2 sets of 6 loaves, and the other articles of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay. The Arizal describes this in more detail about how the letters are reflected in the Kalim of the Beit HaMikdash. We're not going to be able to go there now. But the Vav is clearly a remez to the idea of a loaf of bread, which is not that hard to imagine. Now, of course, bread is the universal metaphor of life force in human existence, the staff of life, as they call it, for many reasons. People who have a problem with gluten, which I can understand, might not like that, but this has been the historical reality about wheat as a main source of sustenance in human life. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more paragraphs that carry on with these metaphors of the physical items in the Mikdash and what they represent. So maybe we'll carry on with that next week. But it's great to be back with all of you, and have a great Shabbat. And we will carry on next week, and look forward to being with you again. Shabbat Shalom. Kol Tuv.